Howdy, my name is Dr. Craig Coufal. I'm an associate professor and extension specialist here in the Department of Poultry Science. And in this segment, we're going to go over identification of parts for the FFA contest. In your manual, this starts on page 46. Page 46 and 47 has a description of the various parts you're going to be identifying in the contest. And then on the following pages, they have actual pictures of them. Sometimes pictures, particularly in the manual, are difficult to make out exactly what the parts look like. So what we're going to do today is show you the parts, and we're really going to show you where they come from, because really the best way to identify the parts and know them very, very well is to understand the anatomy of the carcass of the chicken. So everyone's familiar with the wings, the breast, and then of course then we have the legs. But we'll get into a little more detail of how to identify those different parts as we disassemble the carcass. Now, when you go buy a carcass at the store, a whole carcass, they're usually wrapped in a plastic type bag. When you open the carcass, most times, most processors will have what we call the giblets on stuffed kind of in the body cavity of the bird. So if you reach inside, when you open the carcass, you'll find some of the other parts that we identify, such as the gizzard, the liver, and the heart. All right, and we call those the giblets of the bird. Those are some of the edible internal organs. A lot of times we like to turn those into Thanksgiving gravy and stuffing and stuff when we make our turkey at Thanksgiving. All right, so these are, again, the gizzard, very easily identified. It kind of has two parts to the muscle. It's usually when it's a whole gizzard, you can see it's folded together as a muscle. It's the muscular stomach of the bird. And when they process it to clean it, they cut it in half at the end, so it can be displayed either outwardly. You'll see this kind of whitish blue connective tissue on the outside of the gizzard. If you turn it to the inside, you'll kind of see these folds of the inner wall of the gizzard. Very easy to identify. The liver, notice it has this kind of darkish red, kind of mottled sometimes, depending how much of the blood has seeped out of the liver. Appearance usually has 3 distinct lobes, so it's very easy to identify the liver. And of course the heart that pumps the blood of the animal, also very easy to identify. So those are very simple to identify in a contest. The other part that sometimes will be also located in the body cavity of the bird is the neck. Of course, the neck comes from the front of the bird, but typically when they process the birds, that is cut off and they'll put it inside the body cavity. Again, that's also a fairly easy part to identify. Sometimes you'll see some fat or connective tissue around the skin, but you'll always notice that it has these vertebrae on the ends that you can see that are pretty easy to identify. So that's a neck. All right, so those are probably some of the easier parts to identify in the contest. All right, so let's get started. How do you cut up a chicken? All right, let's just start at the beginning. And if you look at the pictures in the manual, what it really tells you is it starts with the biggest parts and then works down to the smaller parts is how it's organized. All right, so you notice the first part is called a half. All right, that's simply half of the chicken cut lengthwise. All right, so I like to start by, well, you can remove the tail. We don't need the tail, and the tail is not a part. All right, and so we'll just cut right down the side of the backbone. All right, and hopefully I do this without messing up today. We'll do our best. All right, and then we cut down right through the breast. All right, and we've got a half of a chicken. All right, so that's pretty easy to identify, right? You've got a wing, you got a breast, and you got a leg. It's a half of a chicken. All right, now if you took that half, all right, and we're going to make a cut between the leg and the breast. All right, and then, but we're not going to remove that leg just yet. And then we cut halfway down the vertebrae, down the back of the bird. down the backbone. Okay. All right, I'm going to put these to the side for a moment. Come back to those. I'm going to start with this half. Do the same thing. Okay, basically I'm cutting the half in half. I'm making a quarter. All right. Okay, on page 52, we've got breast quarter. All right. Notice the breast quarter has the wing attached. All right, so that's just the quarter of the chicken. All right, and the thing that always distinguishes the breast quarter from just another breast cut is, notice whenever you have the word quarter, it means there's backbone attached. Okay, that backbone is still attached to that part. So this would be a breast quarter, and it's very distinct again because we've got backbone. If you don't have backbone, like this other half that I cut, all right, then it's not necessarily a quarter. All right, you can see the difference here. All right, this one is the breast quarter because it has the backbone. This one does not. All right, so this one wouldn't actually be a cut. The only cut in the book that has the wing, the only properly made cut that still has the wing attached to the quarter, is the breast quarter. Okay, so if it's cut correctly, you should see the wing attached and you should see the backbone. All right, so we'll put that one to the side over here. You guys can look at that one for a little while. All right, so then notice on this other rear quarter, all right, the rear quarter of the bird that I cut, we still got the backbone, all right, attached to the leg. All right, so that's going to be, if you look in the book, all right, that's going to be called leg quarter, right? That's the top of page 53, okay? Remember, the word quarter always means there's going to be some backbone attached, all right? So that's the leg quarter, all right, versus, let me clean this one up a little bit. I'm going to pop the thigh bone from that hip joint, all right, and separate any back material from that joint, or at that hip joint. Okay, get rid of that. All right, and we've got another cut. Sometimes this is one that people get a little bit confused on. We'll trim some fat off here. All right, you can distinguish between these two cuts that are actually very different, but they look very similar. All right, this one is just called the leg. All right, the leg meaning it's got the thigh and the drumstick together. Okay, that is one cut. That's called the leg. Whereas if you have leg quarter, all right, it's got the backbone attached. Okay, so if you look at these two and compare them, you'll see the backbone here on the leg quarter versus just the leg. There is no backbone. The distinction is you'll see the hip joint here. You'll see the end of the femur bone in that thigh. All right, so those are two different cuts. They look a little bit similar, and you have to learn the difference between those two. All right, so we'll put that one over here for a minute. Okay, so that's our leg quarter. If I then take the leg, all right, okay, which is also on page 53, right there below leg quarter, and then I separate the drumstick and the thigh, all right, and I always like to do it from the top because I can see, kind of feel where that joint is, and I cut right through that joint. All right, now I have made a thigh, all right, and a drumstick. Most of us are familiar with drumsticks, all right, so thigh and drumstick, if those two are combined, it's the leg, all right, so we're just subdividing parts now. Now, we'll go back to this piece, and we'll make one more distinction here. Again, if I cut right through that joint, separating the drumstick from the thigh part of the bird. All right. Now I've also once again, I'll put these on the plate here for you. I've got two parts that are very similar. Okay, they're both the thigh part of the chicken, all right? But in our identification of parts, this one is simply called a thigh. This one is called thigh with back portion, okay? Because that's right here on page 53. Notice again, this was the leg quarter with the drumstick removed, so we've still got that back portion attached to that thigh. So you've got a thigh and thigh with back portion. Okay, again, you have to, if it has any backbone, if it has any of the vertebrae showing or attached to that thigh, then it's that rear quarter with the drumstick removed, and that is thigh with back portion. Okay, so two different but similar parts there. Okay, let's continue with our I think that's pretty much most of the dark meat cuts. We'll come back to that in a minute. Let's continue with our breast cuts. Okay, so we said this one actually isn't a cut in the book at all because we still have the wing attached, but we don't have any backbone left. We've cut the backbone away. So this one is actually not a cut. So to make it a cut, we have to remove the wing. Okay, so we're going to cut right through the joint there where the wing attaches to the breast. All right, and we'll make a good demonstration here with the wing as well. I'm going to come back to my breast quarter over here, and I'm going to remove the wing on this one as well. Okay, so we've got the two wings of the chicken. Now, if you look in the manual on, let's see, where is it? All right, there we go. On page 54, B54 of the manual, you'll notice you have different wing cuts. Well, let's knock these out right quick. They're pretty simple. All right. The entire wing, cut from the breast all the way to the tip, is what we term just simply the word wing. All right. In the wing, there should be three distinct segments. We have the portion closest to the breast, kind of the mid portion, and then the wing tip. All right. Sometimes it will be displayed. You can take the wing tip and you can kind of fold it up against the other portion. It may be kind of displayed even like kind of like in a little pile. All right. Or it could be spread out. Okay. That's the exact same cut. It's just displayed differently. All right. And I could flip it over, and kind of tuck this under there in different ways if it would stay for me. All right. But notice if it's got the three different segments, if it's got more than one segment, you're going to call it a wing. It's just a plain wing. Now, if I take one of those wings and I'm going to remove the wing tip, the wing tip is not a cut. All right. That's just discarded. Okay. So that's the outer third of the wing. Get rid of that. And then I cut through this middle joint. We've got the part right that would attach closest to the breast. And then, of course, out here at the wing tip, if I sever in the joint, that center joint, okay, now I've made two separate cuts. All right, so we'll compare these. All right. Okay, if we look there on page 54, B54 in the manual again, this one is termed drumette. Okay, it kind of looks like a little small drumstick. All right, I've got my drumstick over here. Let's compare these two. All right, notice this is from the leg, right? This is the drumstick. This is the drumette from the wing. So that's kind of where the word drumette comes from. They look very similar. All right, but the drumette is smaller. And of course, it has the wing is going to have more of a white meat appearance, kind of like breast meat, compared to the dark meat of the leg. So depending on size, it could be a little confusing, but always look and understand where those different cuts come from. The leg skin has a different appearance than the wing skin, all right, and the meat also has a different appearance, all right. So that's how you would separate those two, all right. But again, this one is the drumette, all right, and this middle portion is always easily identified. You can see it has these little feather tracks in the skin where the primary wing feathers are attached to the bird. We call that the wing portion. Okay, so we have three different cuts that could come from the wing of chicken: the wing portion, and the drumette. All right, so understand those different wing cuts. All right, we'll put those over there. Maybe you guys can see those a little better. All right, so I think I've covered the legs, I've covered giblets, I've covered the wings. Let's get back to our breast here, because sometimes the breast cuts are the most difficult to identify. All right, so let's go back to the page 50 here in the book. All right, so what we currently have, all right, I'm going to skip, let's get to this one. All right, if we look at this piece here, all right, this one, remember, was the breast that I cut off a half of the chicken. I removed the wing, I removed the backbone. So what I've got left is a split breast. All right, because anytime the bone is still intact in the bird, in the breast meat, we call it a split breast. All right, and this one, if you noticed, is going to be identified as the split breast with ribs. Okay, because notice we have the ribs out here on the side of the breast. Okay, if you flip it over, that's pretty easy to see. You have the ribs over here on this side of the bird, of the breast. Okay, so split breast with ribs. It's simply no backbone attached. Okay, all the backbone would be over here, has been cut away. The wing has been cut away, and we've got a split breast with ribs. Okay, that's on page 50. All right, again, that could be displayed either this way. We make it really easy with the ribs exposed. You can see that pretty easily. Most of the time in the contest, we may put it like this. And the difference is you've got to notice that these ribs are out here with this little extra meat on the side of the breast. Okay, so what would you guys call this one? All right, we actually made it by mistake, but it's a good teaching point. All right, we had the breast quarter with the wing. Okay, we just called that breast quarter. All right, if that wing was still attached like that, that would be a breast quarter. I cut the wing off. All right, and now we've got another cut on page 53. On page 52. Okay, called the breast quarter without wing. Okay, so we've got breast quarter and breast quarter without wing. Okay, the same cut, except in this case the wing has been removed. Again, the dead giveaway to identify this part, all right, is that you've got the backbone still attached. All right, so you can compare that to the split breast. Okay, again, they're the exact same cut of the breast, with the exception that we still have the backbone attached to that split breast with ribs. If you have backbone attached to a part, again, that's where the term quarter comes in. So you've got breast quarter, but without wing. All right? All right, hopefully that's pretty straightforward. All right, let's see what else we got left we can take with these parts we've already made, so we ain't got to cut up extra chickens. Let's move into some of the boneless ones. All right, now there's one called the boneless, skinless split breast with rib meat. Let's see if I can do this without messing it up. All right, so we've got our split breast with ribs. Okay, so boneless, skinless means we're going to take out all the skin and bones. Okay, well, taking off all the skin should be pretty straightforward. Hopefully, if I don't make a miscut here, but we got plenty of chicken carcasses. If I mess it up, we can get another one. All right, so we'll just peel the skin off of this breast. Sometimes some of the little fat or connective tissue stays attached. That's okay. All right, if the skin is gone, okay, now we're boneless. But to be boneless, skinless, obviously we got to get rid of the bones. All right, so what we got to do is carefully remove the bones. Sometimes it's easier to do on a full carcass, but we'll see if we can make it out of this piece that we have here. Okay, we got to get the wishbone out of there. There we go. Okay, we don't want to lose that rib meat. Okay, so we'll kind of peel that back a little bit. We'll kind of fillet that little bit of meat off those ribs. Okay, we don't want to include the tenderloin. We'll get to that in a minute. Again, this is kind of harder to do from a small part. It'd probably be easier to do from a big bird, but that's okay. I want you to see where it comes from. So we take the bigger piece and we remove the bones. Okay, we got a little bit of the wishbone in there I got to get rid of yet. Okay. Getting close. I got to get rid of one more little bone here yet. Okay, so that's not the most perfect cut, but you can see that we've removed the skin, we removed all of the bones, but we have kept that rib meat intact off the side of those ribs on that breast, okay? So on page 51, this would be the boneless, skinless, split breast with rib meat, all right? So you can see how the rib meat is still attached to that boneless, skinless breast meat. All right, and then of course we've got the keel bone here still left intact. And if we're real careful, we can kind of just peel out that tenderloin. This one's kind of been a little bit messed up. We'll probably get a prettier one here in a minute. But again, that would be the tenderloin. All right, is a nice little thin piece of white meat inside, from the inside of the breast. You have two muscles in the breast of the bird. You have the pectoralis major, all right, which is the big piece of the breast meat, and you have the pectoralis minor, which is what we tend call in the cuts a tenderloin. All right, so this one would be the tenderloin. Again, not the prettiest one. I kind of messed it up a little bit there getting it out. But that would be the tenderloin. Notice it's much smaller, and usually if they haven't cut it off, there'll be a little tendon attached to the top of it. That's also a very dead giveaway. That little tenderloin, that little tendon right there will tell you that is the tenderloin. Okay, let's get another carcass and we'll do some comparison here. All right, now let's, again, we'll compare a split breast with red meat to one that's just a split breast. So we'll just cut this chicken down the middle one more time. Here I can pull out a much prettier tenderloin this time. Okay, that one might look a little bit better than the other one, all right? But again, those are both tenderloins, all right? The inside muscle of the breast is the tenderloin. All right, let's peel this skin back and we'll remove the breast muscle from this carcass. We won't worry about salvaging or cutting off that little bit of breast meat there over the ribs at the moment, because really what we're worried about is what I want to do here is compare these two, all right? So we'll show you here. Okay, so this would be a boneless, skinless, split breast, all right? So that would be there on the bottom of page 51, all right? You'll notice no rib meat attached on the side over here versus boneless, skinless breast with rib meat has the rib meat on the side of it, all right? So very easy to distinguish those two. They're the same major cut, except one has the rib meat still attached. All right, so we'll cut the breast off of this bird also. Well, let's start by cutting the wing off. We'll get rid of the wing. Okay. I think my knife is getting dull. It cut through too many bones. All right. Oh, here's a very good, well, we'll come back to that. All right. So, again, another good comparison here. Getting a lot of parts built up. All right, so this is our boneless, skinless split breast. This one, with the bone still intact, all right, would just be a, quote, split breast, right? That one is, let's see, also on page 51 there, right? So notice, okay, they're the exact same cut of meat, except one has no skin, no bones. The other has skin on the outside and, of course, bones on the back side, right? So it could be displayed that way. You could flip this one over. Again, the exact same cut, exact same piece of meat, but one has bones, one does not, all right? It's just learning the difference between the two cuts as far as terminology goes. Now, there's one more comparison we'll make with these breast cuts. All right, we'll take our breast quarter over here, okay? And if we remove the ribs, if I remove the backbone but leave the ribs on, okay, so notice this was a breast quarter, remember, because I had the backbone on it. If I remove the backbone, okay, now I've got a split breast with ribs. Notice we still have the ribs attached, okay? That one also there is on page 50 in the manual. Okay, so compare these two. Okay, I'm going to put this to the side over here. Okay, and we've got a split breast with ribs and just a split breast. Okay, so again, very similar cut, but notice this one has the ribs. Sometimes if it's displayed this way, it's hard to see the ribs, but notice the difference in the width of those two cuts, right? You got the extra ribs out here, you're going to see that little bit of extra meat out there. And of course, if you flip it over, then it's quite obvious, right? Okay. This one has the ribs, so that's split breast with ribs versus just the split breast where the ribs have been removed. Okay, so very similar cuts there, but different terminology due to those extra rib bones. All right, I think we're getting very close to getting most of those smaller cuts done. Let's grab another carcass, and we'll just quickly hit some of the bigger ones that they have on page 49 in the book. So notice, earlier I divided the bird longitudinally, all right, the long way, and I got a half of a chicken. All right, that's called a half if you got a wing and a leg. Okay, there's another way to divide the chicken, and that's from front to back. All right, so if we make a cut to divide the skin here from the breast and the leg, we're just cutting through that skin there on the side and some connective tissue. My knife is definitely getting dull. Okay, and then about halfway, again, from the front of the chicken to the back of the chicken, if I make a cut, if I pop right between those vertebrae, okay, and then I finish separating, all right, the skin and the other tissue there. All right, so notice in the book on page 49, we've got something called the front half of the chicken. All right, let me get these other breast cuts here out of the way. Okay, we've got the front half of the chicken, we got the wings on, and then we've got the rear half. We've got two legs. So very simple to identify those. Pretty simple cuts. All right, so we've got rear half and front half. All right, then the next one down there on page 49 would be whole breast with ribs. Okay, that one's pretty simple to make. Let's do that right quick. We take the front half of the chicken and we're going to remove the wings because it's simply the whole breast. Okay, so we take the front half, we remove the wings. Okay, and then to get the part where it says with ribs, we simply have to remove that backbone. All right, so you can see here, the backbone is still attached. So we're going to cut through those ribs on either side of the backbone to remove the backbone, but leaving the ribs intact. Clean some of this front skin up a little bit. Okay, and we've got the whole breast with ribs. Okay, they're on page 49 in the book. So you can see it's the whole breast, the whole thing, with the ribs on both sides. All right, so it could be displayed this way, pretty easy to see, or it could be displayed in the contest this way. All right, which would make it a little more, let me put on the plate here, a little more difficult sometimes to identify depending on how it sits on the plate. Okay, if I'm kind of tuck all those ribs underneath there, sometimes it's kind of hard to see those ribs. All right, so kind of the identifier for me is always looking, you know, is that breast kind of standing up? If it's standing upwards, all right, kind of off the plate, most likely those ribs are underneath there. Okay, you can kind of see those ribs are somewhat tucked underneath. Sometimes they're kind of hard to see, or they might be a little more splayed out where you could see them along the side. Let me turn it this way. You know, and sometimes you can see those ribs underneath that breast sitting on the plate. Okay, so that's whole breast with ribs. Pretty simple to make. Sometimes a little more difficult to identify depending on how it's sitting. All right. Now, let me take that same cut. Okay, we'll turn the page here in our manual. All right, and then we've got the whole breast. Okay, the whole breast would simply be the same cut, but we're going to remove the ribs. Okay, so we're going to make a cut between the actual ribs and these other smaller bones that attach to the breast. Okay, and that's just, we'll pop that off. Okay, remove the ribs right at that joint between the ribs and these other little bones coming off the breast. Okay, and this would be on page 50 of the manual, the whole breast. Okay, notice the skin is still on the back side. Just be careful that you don't call this whole breast with ribs. These are not the ribs. Okay, notice, okay, these are the ribs of the bird. Okay, they would be attached right there. Okay, so if we take those ribs away, that now is simply called a whole breast. So that might be a little tricky to sometimes identify just by the language. Okay, so you can see with ribs, all right, and without the ribs, it's just called a whole breast. All right, so that's the distinction there of that particular cut. Okay, if you go down then next in the book, they've got boneless, skinless, whole breast. Okay, so that would be simply removing all of the bones, all right, and removing all of the skin from this breast. I'm not sure I'm going to be successful trying it at this point from this with this piece like this, but I'm going to try. We'll see if we can make it happen. I may have to start over with a new whole carcass. All right. We'll get rid of the skin. All right, so now we're skinless. And we got to get boneless. All right, so that might be a little more tricky to do. We'll see if we can do it here. All right, well that didn't turn out just too bad. Okay. All right, so now we've got the boneless, skinless whole breast. Okay. Basically, it's two boneless, skinless split breasts that are still attached in the middle part of the breast. So it's two halves. It's the whole breast. They're still attached. All right. So that is boneless, skinless whole breast. Now I think there's one more version of this in the book. Okay. Right above it, called boneless, skinless whole breast with rib meat. Okay. If I had not removed those ribs, okay, and I had filleted off also that little breast meat, you would see two little pieces of breast meat coming out here. Just like we talked about earlier, that little extra breast meat would be on either side of this whole breast. Okay, so I'm not going to cut that one, but you can understand, right? There should be two more little pieces of meat on either side of this whole breast, and that would be a boneless, skinless whole breast with rib meat. Okay, all right. So there we go. We got boneless, skinless whole breast, and let me see. I think I've pretty much covered all of it. Let me double check here. All right, one other cut that I went ahead and cut prior to this filming session was one called the wishbone. Okay, the wishbone is a very unique breast cut. Notice we have the two sides of the whole breast. All right, so that would be these two portions right here. Okay, the wishbone is a little tricky to cut. That's why I cut it ahead of time. But it's very easy to distinguish from any other cut in the contest. One, it's still going to have the skin, all right, on the breast. It's going to have the two halves of the breast, but the breast has been cut half across, about halfway from the front to the back of the breast. Okay, so it's the only breast cut you'll notice where the breast meat. Okay, let me turn this around where you can really see it. Where the breast meat has been cut across the breast. All right, all of the other breast cuts have the breast meat intact all the way from the shoulders where the wing would attach all the way to the very tip, okay, where it would be at the back of the keel of the bird. Okay, so all the other breast pieces we've cut today are all fully intact from front to back. The wishbone is the only one where it's cut across the breast meat. Okay, so you'll see where the breast meat has been cut about halfway. Very easy to identify. If you flip it over, if it's cut properly, you should also see the wishbone. You'll see this little fork, all right, this little bone here. This is the wishbone, all right, it's still attached in the breast, all right, giving it the name wishbone, all right. So that's a very easy one to identify if it's cut properly and set up in the contest that way. Okay, so I'll put that one to the side there for you guys to look at. Okay. We got a couple more parts to cover here just real quickly that I've pre-cut. Let's see. Let's bring back my thigh here. Okay. We got a couple of and my drumstick. Where's my drumstick? I got a big pile of parts over here. Okay, so we've got a thigh and a drumstick. We cut those earlier and identified those. Again, the thigh doesn't have any back portion on it. If I remove the skin from the thigh, okay, sometimes you'll have a little extra fat on there. That's just fat. That's okay. We'll trim some of that off. Okay, now I've got a thigh that is skinless. All right, that's not an actual cut, but there is a cut in the book called a boneless, skinless thigh. Okay, so if I took this skinless thigh and then also took a knife and filleted out and cut out the little bone that's left, you would end up with this cut, okay, which is a boneless, skinless thigh. Okay, so notice the boneless, skinless thigh is just the thigh with the skin and the bone removed. All right, so you kind of just have to learn. Typically, the thigh is going to have some of this extra fat on either side, so that's pretty easy to identify. If you turn it over this way, okay, you can kind of see how it looks compared to the thigh, right? You've got the bone still in the thigh. This has just been cut out to give us a boneless, skinless thigh. Okay, so the other contrast to that cut then is the boneless, skinless drum. Okay, so the boneless, skinless drum would be the same concept. Taking the drumstick, removing the skin, removing the bone, filleting off the meat. All right, and you end up with this cut. Okay, so sometimes people will confuse the boneless, skinless thigh with the boneless, skinless drum. Okay, again, this is the exact same piece of meat, just the skin and bone removed from the drumstick. The really distinguishing feature that you can distinguish these two apart is the boneless, skinless drum. If it's cut properly, you'll often see these little tendons, okay, where the meat is attached to the bottom of the drumstick of the leg there. Okay, you'll see these little tendons sticking out. Okay, that's kind of the giveaway between the thigh. So always look at these two parts and compare them, and so that you can not miss those in the contest. Again, sometimes we can display them upwards like this. Okay, and they can look very similar. Okay, but notice these are different cuts, right? We have a boneless, skinless drum. You can see some of those tendons sticking out there versus the boneless, skinless thigh. Again, the thigh sometimes will have a little extra fat as a giveaway. But again, two separate cuts. You just got to learn what they look like, right? So get you a leg and a thigh and debone them and learn what those two cuts look like. They're pretty easy to identify once you figure out the distinguishing characteristics of each. Okay, I think I have covered it all. Well, you know what? I got one more thing. I don't have it here today, but there's one more cut in the book. The last one there on page 55 is called a paw. Okay, the paw is the actual foot of the chicken. Okay, so you'll see the distinguishing yellow color of the scaly skin from the foot. You'll see the 4 digits, the little thumb, if you will, on the back of the chicken and the 3 front toes. And so we call that the paw. Very easy to distinguish. Just do not get it confused with terminology. Again, it's not the leg of the bird, it's the foot of the bird. Okay, so leg refers to the thigh and the drumstick, whereas the paw refers to the foot. All right, so just make sure you understand the difference in terminology there. It's a very easy part to identify when you see it. Okay, and I think that's everything we've covered. Thank you for joining me today.